Hi, and a hearty welcome to the first edition of Research Live, an initiative which is principally aimed at providing a web-based platform for discussion among early career researchers. And notably, such discussions will be informed or enriched by inputs from more established research leaders. And for today, we have Professor Geoff Rodgers. Professor Rodgers' current role is to lead Brunel University in the next stage of its research development, to principally ensure that it sustains a diverse and evolving vibrant research community. He was recently appointed as one of the new members of HEFKI Knowledge Exchange Strategic Advisory Committee. Professor Rodgers is also the chair of the Research Excellence Group of London Higher. It's my pleasure to have Professor Rodgers here today. Good afternoon, Professor Rodgers.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to Research Live. So to start with, what do you perceive to be the key highlights in your academic career so far?
The things I've enjoyed most within my career, I guess there are two aspects to it. First of all, in my current role, I get to work with the very best researchers within the institution and try to help them to improve their research and be more successful and take their research out of research into public benefit. And I think that has been a great experience to see very talented researchers right the way across the disciplines and see how they work and working with them to try and improve their outcomes. So that's certainly been a highlight. But also personally, I suppose I enjoyed very early on in my career, I wrote, in fact the very first paper I wrote was on a particular problem in random matrix theory, and 20 years later I wrote a paper that built on that applied it to a very different problem that lots of people were interested in at the time, and I was able to, and so I had two papers which were quite highly cited together, separated by the best part of about 18 years, and that was quite a nice feeling to see the sort of the progression of the subject and applying a methodology I developed in 1988 applied to a problem that didn't exist until about 2006, 2007. So that was quite a nice feeling. Anyway.
Can you tell us a bit about the main challenges you were faced with in your journey?
Well, I guess early on, I've been at Brunel a long time, the research culture was not so well developed, and so there weren't so many people to work with, and obviously finding people in your own field to work with was quite even more challenging. And so I started off quite an isolated. Quite early on, I realised I didn't have any collaborators and needed to find a way of finding them, really. And it took me a while to realise you have to be quite proactive about that. You can't just sit in the office and wait for somebody to put their head around the door and say, hey, do you want to write a paper on X? You have to actually go out and find these people. And so I wrote to a couple of people overseas and said, would you like to collaborate with me? There's this money available from the Royal Society to work together. And one of them said yes, and we applied for the money and got it, and I worked with him and wrote 2 or 3 papers. And it was quite a nice relationship, and it allowed me to get my research moving in that area. And then so I then wrote the letter to somebody else and worked with them as well. And over the next 10 years, built up my career working with people in Europe, who I approached directly. And then, of course, what happens is, of course, people started approaching me. And before I knew where I was, I had a large group of collaborators all over Europe, and that has driven my career ever since. But it was the realisation that, early on, that you have to actually make those networks. I mean, these days you probably send an email these days rather than write a letter, but you still have to be proactive about it and make it work for you.
What would you say are the key things early career researchers need to consider in order to be successful?
High quality research has 3 attributes, typically, in theory, and that is that it's significant, that is, say you're working on an important problem, that it's original, that it's new, and that it's rigorous, that it's well carried out, the methodology is strong. And I think you need to try to ensure that you're working on problems in those 3 ways, and that's best done by working in fields and in areas which are important, both in research terms but also to society more broadly. And that's clearly what I would do if I went back again. I would be thinking about it like that right from the very beginning, and it's taken me about 15 years to get round to that idea, but I think those are the things. And so trying to look round in your field, where are the important problems, where can I make my name, and then starting to think what you can do in order to make a contribution to that, and then finding good people who will work with you to do those things. And early career researchers may not perhaps have as many skills, but they have time and energy. And when you get more experienced, you have experience, but you don't have time, and sometimes you don't have all that much energy either. So everybody wants to work with early career researchers. So early career researchers need to be proactive about linking up with people that they want to collaborate with.
If you were to begin as an early career researcher, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
I think I would have started getting grants much sooner, because for a long time I wrote a lot of grants that were pretty uncompetitive, and it took me a long time to realise that I wasn't writing in the right area, I wasn't doing it in the right way, and so on. And now, of course, I've considerable grant income over the last 10 or 15 years that has been built up in the first period, hardly anything at all. So I think I would have done that differently as well. And I tried to pay attention to there's a lot more development and training available now than there was in the late 80s and early 90s. So I think taking advantage of that is very important, and really engaging with it and working out what it means for yourself is probably pretty important. And I think I'd like to think if it had been available then, I'd have taken advantage of it. But it was more difficult then to learn those skills. People thought that researchers were just born, and that once you got your first faculty position, that was it. You were there, and that's obviously ludicrous, of course. But
now, in terms of the future, what do you envisage to be the main challenges that future research holds for early career researchers?
It's clear that with funding diminishing and people wanting to understand what the value of research is, people are going to be much more clustered around major sort of societal challenges. And I think if you can't see how, if you're starting your career out now, you need to be thinking about your research in terms of societal challenges around environment, energy, so on health, and lining yourself up with those things. I think curiosity-driven research, which can't map towards those sorts of issues, is always going to be vulnerable to. There will be a base of high-quality research, but if you can't see how your research is fitting in sort of the bigger issues that society faces, then I think that's not a good position to be in, because the resource is diminishing, and I think quite legitimately high-quality research is being increasingly seen as that to which then out of the body of research goes on to have impact. And so I think people that's one of the key changes that's taking place at the moment. But then, issues around open access and open data are going to be very important. So people have got to, develop. Everything has to be published open access, but also people now need to be publishing their data, and I think within 10 years' time everybody will be. So systems have got to be built to do that. And I think issues around research integrity are going to change the way in which researchers do research and think about research in the future as well. And I think younger researchers need to pay attention to those issues, because they are a developing agenda, and people are going to have to change, in some respects, change the way they do research in order to document it better and disseminate the findings more effectively.
And now, finally, prior to this interview, we had discussions with a few early career researchers. And one of the key things they told us about, talking about their main challenges, was the fact that they find it quite difficult to combine research and teaching. So we wondered whether you might have any advice on this.
Yeah, academics, people, paint these things as two things which are in competition. In fact, they are linked together in a single whole, which is academic activity, and you have to see them as two sides of the same coin. You cannot do one without the other. Effective researchers have an obligation to teach, to create the researchers of tomorrow, and an innovative teaching, it comes out of research ideas. It comes out of developing the discipline and then communicating that, or developing new teaching methodologies, and which arise out of research. So research and teaching are indivisible. Now, there is only a finite amount of day, and every academic will tell you that they are very busy, but the two are not in competition. They are part of the same activity. And whether you're thinking about research or you're thinking about teaching, the role of the academic is to reflect on the quality of the learning and teaching or the research, make changes to it, evaluate those changes, and then look to see whether those changes have improved the quality, and whether. Now, the only difference between those two things is that what the descriptors of quality in research and teaching are a little bit different. What research and learning if you like, but the same basic process and the same basic obligation of an academic to be engaged in the business of improving the quality of academic work exists. So I see them as indivisible. Though, of course, time, everybody only has 24 hours in their day, of course.
Thank you very much, Professor Rodgers, for taking time off your busy schedule to have this chat with us today.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you.